Yo, coming to you live from World Championship in San Jose. Welcome to the Living Legends podcast.
Half of me wishes I had kept some sealed, and then the other half is like, nah, that was fun opening.
Yeah.
and I have the Arcane rights. I hope your luck. If you ever open it, I hope your luck is better than mine, because I've opened 4 cases of first edition Arc. This was back when it first came out, and 2 of the cases did not have a legendary in them.
Oh, nice.
I have like a 50% case pull rate, and both of the cases were Grasp of the Arc Knight. So out of 4 cases, I only opened up 2 Grasp. I ended up trading one for anyway. Long story short, I have a full set of Arc cold foil legendaries now, but back when it first came out, I was like, wow, this kind of sucks. And if I spent the money that it's worth today, oh man, it would suck even more.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, are we ready to start?
Hell yeah.
Yes.
Sweet. We normally just kind of like chat like this and then roll into the opening, but maybe we'll be a little bit more structured here and actually have like some sort of basis.
Whatever you guys want to do.
Right now. Start
right now. I mean, I am recording. How's it going, everyone? How's it going, everyone?
There it is.
And welcome to another episode of the Living Legends podcast, your weekly Flesh and Blood podcast where we talk about all aspects of the Flesh and Blood trading card game. As you can see today, or I'm not going to beat around the bush too much, you can see we are joined here again by Bryan Gottlieb. And I'm motioning this way because this is how it is that the viewers will see Bryan's here, but in the actual call, he's like actually above me. But yeah, Bryan's joining us again for the second time. We're going to be talking a lot about Outsiders, if I had to guess right. Bryan did have a hand to play in designing and or developing the set. Maybe we can talk about the distinction between the two in just a moment, but yeah, how are you all doing? Let's toss it off to Bryan first to see how you doing, man. How you doing today?
Well, I'm great. Anytime I get to sit down with the Living Legends podcast, I am doing fantastic. And I was particularly thrilled to check in with you guys because I think for the preferences of this podcast, we just put out probably the best Flesh and Blood set y'all are ever going to get. Like, it's much, I can't really imagine getting much closer to the interest present in this group of fine gentlemen here in a future set. So this was definitely the right time for me to come back and chat with y'all.
Yeah, and it kind of actually happened organically. I was just chatting with Bryan over Twitter, and I was like, hey, actually, you know what? You want to come back on the podcast? And so, yeah, very, very happy to have you back on. Thank you for joining. I think what says it most about Outsiders is that the Fabled card is an assassin ranger dual class card, and I'm like, it's just my Fabled. It's just like it's literally the 2 classes that I played. Yeah, it was made for me. Not actually, but and
if you were looking into the LSS studio, there's this big board we had on the wall, and it was just your face. And depending on how much we were tailoring the set to you, you had like levels of smile we could adjust. And so when this was the version that we actually settled on, it was just huge, massive smile pulled up all the way.
Yeah, for sure. I'll ignore all of like the little darts that are posted around it too.
Yeah.
So, having introduced our regular host here, let's toss it over to Bill, who is currently above me in what you fine folks are watching. How's it going, Bill?
It's going very well. I'm Bill from the Spike Feeders. I had 2 pre-releases that I went to over the weekend. Both were on Sunday, which is 2 days ago for when we're filming this. And it was actually kind of interesting because I got to rep the Living Legends podcast mat that Az gifted me so kindly. And I actually had 3 separate people come up to me and be like, "Hey, you're Bill from the Living Legends podcast, right?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I am."
Nice.
You're the Canadian part of the overall picture here, Bill.
Yeah. So yeah, I have had thankfully the ability to test out a little bit of Outsider stuff hands-on, as opposed to just in theory. So I think we're gonna have some really good discussions today with our good pal Bryan.
Absolutely, yeah.
And how about you, Az? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah, I only managed to get to 1 pre-release, which was yesterday actually. So it was actually Monday. I forced Azalea, although the pool probably suggested that I shouldn't have done. But you have to represent your favorite character.
Wouldn't expect anything less.
Exactly, yeah. And this is probably, like as Brian said just a moment ago, probably one of the sort of the only times to play in a sort of sealed environment with Azalea. It's going to be a long time until the next one potentially. So had to do it, had to experience it. But the great thing is that I pulled in my first pack from pre-release, I pulled the spoiler card that was given to me by LSS in the exact same format, cold foil legendary, which I was just like, this is a sign from the Ranger Gods. Everyone was like, oh my God.
It was meant
brilliant.
to be. It was meant
to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, just can't wait to chat about all things Outsiders. We've got a load of questions here from all over the place on the community. So it's going to be a good one. So thanks for joining, listeners and all viewers.
Yeah, and before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to all the people who submitted questions. I got a lot of questions, all from Twitter, Discord, YouTube. So shout out to everyone who submitted a question. I don't have everyone's name here, but thank you all. So
yeah,
we ready to get started? This is gonna be a fun one. We're not gonna do our normal stuff. We're just gonna jump right in because this is gonna be a great conversation. And I'm also not going to do the whole introduction asking Bryan like where he started playing cards and stuff. If you want that, go watch the previous one.
Or any of the other 40 podcasts that I'm going to be on this week. Like all of them will fill in the blanks on that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. But I do want to ask one thing before we get started. It's something that I already alluded to. The difference between design and development, and which side, or maybe both, that you're particularly working on for LSS and Flesh and Blood. Would you illuminate for everyone?
Yeah, my focus is on the design side, and basically that is bringing the cards in their first format into existence. Laying out the skeleton of the set, of the structure, all the bones come from the design team, and then all of the many talented teams at LSS start to fill in the meat on them, with beautiful art and with making sure that I didn't just ruin the game by making nonsensical, overpowered garbage. And just so many people get their hands in and make it into the beautiful, amazing set that it is. But the design team lays down the bones of that and gets the ball rolling. I also I work on the dev side too. Like I a little bit help to facilitate some of the back and forth between design and dev, and just helping the dev team stay focused on like design's intentions for cards, proposing design solutions when dev is like, this is just not working. And that is pretty common throughout both sides of the design dev process, that we kind of work back and forth with each other. Certainly some of the best design cards in Outsiders come from dev members as well, and it's just a really good system we use as a back and forth. But technically, my role is on the design side.
Yeah, how much? I think this was one of the questions at one point, but I think it's a good time to ask it. How much involvement do you have with the creative team in regards to creating cards? Is it more of like a top-down design? Is it mechanics first, or is it like lore and flavor first, or is it kind of like a mishmash of the two?
It depends. It is a mishmash of the two. And personally, I don't work much with the creative team in the same way that I kind of function as the bridge between design and development. James functions as the bridge between creative and design, and certainly things that I will suggest will like get brought back to them, and sometimes it like every part of the organization informs the other, right? We're all having ideas flowing back and forth, but in terms of like directly corresponding with design and like getting their input on things, a lot of that gets filtered to me through James, and vice versa as well.
Nice. I do want to give a huge shout out to all of the separate teams at LSS. You all do like an incredible job. Everyone from the creative department to the design and development to even like folks in like organized play and all that kind of stuff. So
yep, and this set in particular, like it just stood out to me. So, and maybe just this because this was the first set that I was like involved with from the very beginning, like helping craft that skeleton. But what art design creative did with this set is like I can't overstate how much of an impact they had on the quality of this product. Like it is so dramatic, their influence over it, where like, yeah, there's neat ideas here and there's fun cards to play, but I mean, I played with them in skeletal form. I know how drastic the shift is to seeing this kind of grimy, gruesome nature of the pits and how well these stories are told through gameplay. I think they did a tremendous job. And there's so many little subtle details too. My favorite thing in the entire set is the diseases and how well they track across, like, not only the watermarks, but go look at the color of all these cards that make diseases. And I don't know if people have realized this yet, but like, it's consistent. Anything that makes a blood rot is going to be red. Anything that's inertia is going to be blue, I think, unless I have my signals crossed. And then frailty comes in at green.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna guess yellow for frailty, but green also makes sense. It's kind of
greenish yellow. Yep.
Yeah.
So same as like what you spoiled, Bill. The infecting shot is like the blood and everything, and the withering shot is the green one, and the inertia is the blue one. So yeah, I'd noticed that. I love the color schemes. It's awesome.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing that I think, like, when you actually sit down to play the games, it's making it so much easier for you to play, and you don't even realize it sometimes. Like, you don't realize that when you're looking across the table, you're able to identify these things that much quicker, and it takes that less of your mental load. And that's the type of thing that, like, art direction, design contributing to the product, it affects the way the games are played as well. And that's why I say, like, these cards just aren't the same without their input. And I think particularly on this set, their work was tremendous.
Yeah,
definitely.
I had the distinct honor of previewing Uzuri, and as such, Creative gave me an article that has not yet been released. It's one of Uzuri's stories, and it's fantastic. But I want to say that I love how the flavor of the story melds with the actual mechanics of the card. And you did see this in the article that they already released. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's the one with Arachne coming back. And, you know, I'm not going to spoil the whole story here, but you find out that maybe the assassination job in the Emperor was not on the up and up. And in the story, like, Uzuri has the ability to transform her weapon into something else. And once I read that and I saw that her name is Uzuri Switchblade, and I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing here. Like, Switchblade also, you know, it's a physical weapon, but also she literally switches her blade to something else. And I think stuff like that is very, very cool. That, you know, not a lot of people would notice or appreciate, but I think it's just like, once you like get into it and start really like taking a look at all of the aspects, I think it's super, super cool. So yeah.
I mean, just tacking on to that, actually, one of the questions that was actually put in here by me, actually. So we're going to jump to that one because I think it's in tandem to the whole switching thing. Would be about the mechanics of that as well, because a lot of people have made the sort of comparison to ninjutsu, Brian, which you've probably heard. So obviously, going on from that mechanic, would there be any sort of mechanics that you could sort of visualize from other games that you've played or been involved in that would really work in like a Flesh and Blood setting, which you might want to sort of bring in?
Well, first, I want to circle back around to the ninjutsu things. And I talked about this with my friends over on the Pitch Perfect podcast, is that I was very shocked when people ninjutsu as like the clear influence for Uzuri. It honestly never crossed my mind. And that's not me trying to be like, oh, like, this is a totally novel idea. There are other things in specifically Magic the Gathering that very much influenced the way I was thinking about that mechanic. It was not ninjutsu though. And it was very surprising to me how hard people fixated in on that being like the inspiration for Uzuri, because it really and truly was not. Now, like, that being presented to me, I do understand where the overlap is. But it was just so strange that was like the default stance, that this was a ninjutsu inspired mechanic where, you know, frankly, I think it had a lot more to do with morph in my eyes, and playing a card face down. And so it was just a surprising conclusion to see everyone reach simultaneously. But as far as other card games, like, look, I love all forms of gaming. I know I've told you guys before, I've played basically every TCG that has ever come out. But at the same time, one of the things I love about Flesh and Blood is that it is mechanically unique. It does do things so unlike other TCGs. And I think that's where it really stands above some of these other games I've experienced throughout my very, very long gaming career. For me, there'll always be bits of influence that come in from other games, for sure. But in terms of like, are there any mechanics that I really want to port over that I'm a big fan of? I can honestly say no. Like, it's just not the way I approach these things. I think about them through strictly flesh and blood lens. And all that being said, I'm sure my past gaming experiences are always informing the way I'm thinking about things. And like,
Oh yeah.
Pointing back to something like Morph as a mechanic that I did enjoy quite a bit in Magic, and I think those things will always sort of weasel their way into my designs a little bit. But there's never anything where I'm just like, we have to bring this to flesh and blood. Like, nothing like that has really occurred to me yet. And maybe someday it will. Like, maybe there will be something where I'm just like, oh, if we just, take inspiration from this awesome mechanic I played with 15 years ago, it's exactly what we're looking for in this spot.
Yeah,
I don't think we'll hesitate to use it, but I don't have like a checklist of things I want to identify.
Nice.
I love that you brought up Morph, because over like the past, I don't know, 5-10 episodes, we've been like theorizing on like what stealth could be, and I think we brought up Morph at one point. Like, we're like, oh, you have to play it face down, and then we brought up the idea of like, it's super awkward to play a card like face down, and so I think the way Uzuri works is, or like to attack with something face down, I should say. It's super awkward to attack with something face down. And you'd run into the problem that Morph initially had in Onslaught. I don't know if people know a lot of the history of this, but Onslaught Limited was kind of a disaster because some Morph cards absolutely dumpstered you if you like called it wrong.
Yeah. Get wrecked every time. Commando, yeah.
Oh, Commando was my favorite. But like, I was like, that's why I was like very trepidatious on like the whole face down thing. But I think the way Uzuri works is a very nice way of doing it.
Well, that's a stealth thing, though, isn't it? It's the stealth, like fixing that as such, because it's on the card face up, so it's just relating to a word that's on there already, which is just fixes everything, which is awesome.
Yeah,
I think too, limiting the possibilities of what could happen on the back end.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. Like capping it at cost to knowing that you're only dealing with things from either the generic card pool or the assassin card pool. Like all of those, I think, create a small enough range of possibilities where it remains surprising and still fun to play against. You never feel like there's just something that completely wrecked you. And I think it creates great moments. One of the last games I played in my own pre-release that I went to, I was playing against an Uzuri, and I was at 7 and I had a piece of equipment left over, and I'm thinking about going for the win next turn, and I'm like, oh, I just have to give this equipment here, because if it's either gore belching or sneak attack, then I'm absolutely boned. And I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, with only one card in hand, those are the only 2 cards that can punish me in the set. It was gore belching, and I would have lost had I not blocked with the one piece of equipment. But like that level of predictability was exactly correct. Like I needed to be able to make that determination that the block here is correct. And I lost a little bit of offensive output on my next turn. I think it was probably a mask I blocked with in that scenario, but it felt like the just right amount of secrecy, like the right distribution of possibilities for the mechanic to really succeed.
Yeah. I think, by the way, just a small side, I think gore belching is a hilarious card, because I had someone like not Uzuri it in against me, and it attacked for 2, and I'm like, God, that has to be like the worst rate I've ever seen on a Flesh and Blood card. It's like a 0 for 2 that doesn't block, and I'm like, all right, that's cool. I was an Arachne player.
High variance card.
Yeah.
But it's just like you look at the pits and all this stuff, and you see gore belching. You're like, what on earth is this doing in here? There's like demons in the art, and it cares about banishing cards like Levia, and it's just like, okay, this is going somewhere, surely.
Well, we do know the next set is Dusk Till Dawn, and we do know that it is very shadow light heavy, and that gore belching feels very shadowy. Just
it does, yeah.
It's no surprise. I mean, LSS, and obviously Brian can attest to this. They like putting in little things here or there. Like you can definitely see all the details that LSS puts in. I think one of the classic ones, one of the oldest ones, is Snatch. The dude from Snatch is the dude from Optical Monocle, and he's wearing the monocle that he stole from Snatch. Yeah,
I did not know that.
That's sick.
Yeah, a little bit of OG Flesh and Blood lore there. Anyway, let's talk about some more outsider stuff. This is one question that I really wanted to talk about, because I found it like super interesting going into outsider spoiler season. Just leading up to the set, we knew it was a pit set, and previous like main region focused sets all had like a region talent. And once we started seeing the spoilers and things started rolling out, we kind of realized that there wasn't a talent, at least in the traditional way that other sets have talents, right? There's not like draconic, there's not elemental or whatever, right? But we did have hybrid cards. So the question here is hybrid a talent? And or will we see an official talent when we and if we revisit the pits?
I don't view it as a talent. I mean, I'm not giving an official answer to that question. I don't know how we like categorize it within LSS, but personally, I don't see it that way. I think the talents are something a little bit extra on a class, and this is just representing two classes. So I wouldn't view it that way. As far as what we'll do when we go back, I think one of the things that I want to become increasingly clear as Flesh and Blood gets older, everything and anything is on the table. So until we're in that moment, until we're back in the pits, I wouldn't even deign to guess whether there will be a talent associated with the pits or not. It all depends how the story evolves, what makes sense from a gameplay perspective. All those things will be balanced when we get back to it. And you just can't predict that far in the future, I believe. Now, that being said, maybe James already knows what the talent is when we go back to the pits. It's entirely possible. But I think it's more free-flowing than that. And we'll just see where the story takes us.
Okay, nice. I also noticed, and I think this was another one of the random questions, that all of the hybrid classes are all hybrid with assassin. Is that like a part of the assassin class, or does it just happen to be like that for this set in particular? Because we didn't have any ninja ranger cards, for example.
We did not, and I think I'm going to leave this one answered. We're gonna have to wait and see how the hybrid class evolves over time, what it's going to do in the future.
Okay, cool. I'm very much looking forward to it. I think hybrid, in particular for limited, is very, very cool. And it lets you stay open while also sort of defining a lane, right? So if there's 3 different classes, picking a hybrid card that's 2 classes sort of puts you into a lane, excludes one class. But I really like that. And I haven't personally drafted yet. I'm very much looking forward to it, but I did play a good number of sealed games. And I think it's just really good for limited. Would you say that it was included for limited in particular, or is just kind of an overall thing that you guys wanted to do?
I think it wasn't included for any one purpose, but there was a goal to sort of open up limited a bit with this set and think about ways how, coming off of Uprising, which was like a very in some ways prescriptive drafting experience, you very much found your lane, you stuck to it. And don't get me wrong, I think Uprising has a lot of charm, and there's a lot of really good things about that limited format. There's flaws too. I wouldn't deny them at all. But we just wanted to do something different this go around. We wanted to open up the drafting experience a little bit, show that Flesh and Blood can have those experiences where you are, unsure what class you're in after pack 1, unsure what hero you're in after pack 2. I've had these experiences drafting before, and it really feels exciting, novel, cool. And if you haven't experienced draft thus far, I think you have experienced about 10% of the greatness that Outsiders Limited has to offer. I honestly think that is where all of these ideas gestate a bit more. They really start to shine and deliver, and be excited. I think you're in for a treat when you get to sit down and draft.
Oh, I am more than excited. I love draft. I don't talk about it enough on my channel, but I used to host weekly Magic drafts. I had my own cube. I'm a huge fan of draft, so I'm very, very much looking forward to this.
Yep.
And a lot of people attribute some of the best draft experiences for Flesh and Blood to Welcome to Wraith, and I can see a lot of, I don't want to say parallels, but similarities. Not exact similarities, but enough that I'm very excited for it. And I do very much like WTR draft, but I think this one might be more exciting because of the class, the hybrid cards, right? Because at least in WTR, you're like, okay, I could pick generics, but like once I start picking like Bravo cards, I'm playing Bravo. But here, even with the split class cards and the 6 heroes, which is something else that I wanted to ask about, you are still open to different play possibilities, even in the class. And so the question, I guess, is when and why did the whole 6 hero thing happen? It's the first set we've had like this many heroes. It's also the first set we've ever had multiple of the same hero in a limited environment. So very curious on that.
Yeah, as far as I remember, as soon as we were sitting down to build Outsiders, we were doing so with 6 heroes in mind. It was just the intention from the beginning. And I see it accomplishing 2 very meaningful things for the format. The first is just diversity, like having all these different play experiences and, sitting down for your limited rounds and being able to face, 3 different heroes throughout your draft. And then you go do your next draft and you play 2 different heroes in the mirror match. And like, that's pretty incredible over the course of a Pro Tour if you could play 6 different heroes across your 6 rounds of draft. I think just in general, our game benefits from having a bit more like expression of these heroes. They're the shining stars of our game, right? And in some ways, the limited format wasn't highlighting them to the same degree that constructed formats do, because there's just fewer of them, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
Going to 6 allowed us to do a little bit more of that. The other thing it does is it really empowers the idea of open drafting, the idea of lanes, because if you think about the way these heroes operate, they have very, very different requirements, even being in the same class. And I think that points really hard in terms of color priorities as well. And that's one of the best things about this draft format, in my eyes, is that I can be an Arachne player and have an Uzuri player passing me to my right, and I can get the cards I need, and that Uzuri can get the cards they need, and we can meet in the finals, even though we've shared the same class and are quote-unquote fighting, because we just need very different cards. We have very different priorities. Same thing with Katsu and Benji, obviously. Benji leverages those yellows and blues so effectively, whereas Katsu is looking for more of those big red combo cards that Benji is like, yeah, I'd like these cards, but I don't need them. I can play a totally different game plan. And, the same way, Arachne really prioritizing those red stealth cards, but Uzuri making incredible use of the blue stealth cards because they enable her abilities so well, because she does leverage daggers so well. I think it just is such a good balance between these color pairings. And again, that's something that to me shines hardest in draft, and one of the reasons why I think that is the best way to experience Outsiders for sure.
It's going to make drafting and like reading draft signals very interesting, I think. Especially when you're in Uzuri and your player to your right passes you like a red sneak attack or something, and you're like, ooh, well, they could still be maybe an assassin, but maybe they're just an Arachne and they just don't want sneak attack.
Very possible.
Yeah, super cool. I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm sure you can't answer this, but I feel like it's the appropriate follow-up. Is the 6 hero limited experience something that LSS is looking to, I don't want to say continue, but is it a design space that you could look into in future sets?
I don't see why not. I mean, let's see how Outsiders goes, but I'm very happy with the finished product. I know a lot of folks at LSS really happy with this finished product, and it sounds like players are happy with the finished product. Nothing we do is ever like canon. Like, it's not like every set from now on is a 6 hero set. We're going to explore, all different permutations of heroes and classes and talents. We want to keep the experience fresh and exciting. And really, when it's time to head into our next limited season, I don't want you to have expectations. Like, I want you to feel like anything could happen, a format that you've never seen before. Maybe there's 20 heroes. Who knows? Anything's possible. And I really want to keep that experience fresh every single time we go into limited season. And I think not establishing hard rules around, number of heroes, distribution of heroes is the best way to do that.
That makes a lot of sense, to be honest, right? It's generally not great to set like confines for yourself, and to be open and to do whatever is the best. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm looking through the... Oh, go ahead.
Having more heroes as well just gives you the room to not only have new heroes that you haven't seen yet, but also bring in like fan favorites as well and fan service the old ones. Like Azalea, for instance, a lot of people were clamoring for that for the longest time. and now suddenly she's got some absolutely awesome cards, and people are just looking at her again in an entirely new light, new people coming into play. And yeah, I think having more heroes will allow you to do that to a certain degree, bringing in the old ones as well. So yeah, absolutely love it.
Just a
Yeah,
heads
keeps
up.
our options open.
Heads up, as your mic is like really quiet all of a sudden.
It was above my face. 'Cause I took
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry.
There you go. We're leaving that in.
I'm hoping the passion sort of shone through, even though I was diluted.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm trying to find the exact question here, but some folks did ask about like the inclusion of like old characters into this set, and if that's something that LSS is looking to do more in the future, like reintroduce old or maybe underused characters like Azalea, maybe like Benji and Katsu, as Flesh and Blood progresses. Is that something that y'all are kind of just keeping an eye on or looking at?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen us do it once. If we do something once, we might do it again. If we haven't done it before, we still might do it. That's what I would say to all those questions. Like it is. I am quite pleased with the response from folks who are diehard aficionados of these characters and really feel like they finally got served. And I know that's really important to James as well. He talks a lot about how, when he meets fans of Flesh and Blood, so it's always about heroes, right? And it's always about, when are you going to support this hero? When is this hero going to get more? And he's very cognizant of that. And one of the things I also emphasize a lot about the way LSS does things, like, we're into fan service, man. Like, we want to give people what they want, and that's the number one goal. And as long as there is appetite for seeing old heroes revisited, I have no reason to think we won't do it again.
Yeah, after seeing Outsiders, I think it's no surprise at all that the next set was announced to be Dusk Till Dawn, and I'm just like, well, I think hopefully Levia and Bolton players can like maybe get some of their joy that we're getting from Outsiders with like with the Katsu and the Azalea support and all that kind of good stuff. Let's see. This is a more draft talk here because we have a bunch of just talks about draft and limited. So like this one says, what was your approach to draft in sealed formats with Outsiders after experiencing and analyzing Aria and Uprising? And then what did you want to like include and avoid when comparing those two sets?
Yeah, it all comes back to the openness ideal. And like I am actually a huge fan of Tales of Aria draft, and I know it's a bit of a polarizing draft format. Some folks really like it, some folks don't. I'm a very big fan, and particularly for how the drafting process goes. I really enjoyed the elemental aspect and being able to kind of straddle two lanes. And I think you see that reflected in the way Outsiders is set up, as far as like what Uprising brought to the table. This isn't a knock on Uprising, but it did kind of drive things in the direction of like what we didn't want to do for this particular go around. Not because we don't believe in Uprising or like feel like Uprising was unsuccessful. It was very successful at a lot of the things it did. Just wanted something different. And like the next limited set coming on the back of Uprising, let's find a different way to give the experience. Let's go back to all melee brutal combat and focus in a little bit on sort of old school Flesh and Blood. Like that was something we talked about a lot, and I think that's where the parallels to Welcome to Wraith come from. It's just old school Flesh and Blood in gameplay, in class types, in all melee damage. All that is reflected across Outsiders.
I do like.
Oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead,
Who's
man.
going? Me?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Love it. So yeah, that's what I like about this as well. Is that everyone has their own way of dealing that little extra bit of damage. Like Riptide does damage through traps. Azalea dominates. Benji's unblockable. Uzuri can attack, react things in it. That sort of window. That's what I love about this as well. There's no like arcane damage, so you can still do these things to prevent it as well. Whereas in those sort of formats, you couldn't, unfortunately, to a certain degree. But I like how everyone's got their own sort of thing that they can do. Yeah,
I have a question here about arcane damage before we get there. You said fisticuffs, and I found it very amusing that I think in a recent interview James mentioned that we were getting back to fisticuffs with Outsiders, and there's literally a card called fisticuffs in the set. I just found that very, very amusing, and I'm like, he wasn't wrong. We are literally getting fisticuffs. Yeah. So anyway, the question does have to do with arcane damage, and it just says, do you see the correlation between the best limited sets and their exclusion of arcane damage focused heroes, those sets being WTR Monarch and potentially Outsiders?
No, I don't. Like, there's no part of me that doesn't think arcane damage can be a successful backbone of a limited format. I think it can be extremely important, extremely fun. Like I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Tales of Aria, where arcane damage, somewhat, I would say, again, polarizingly, is mostly unpreventable. And I still think it added something quite good to that format. I might have taken a little bit more reserved approach, maybe not in terms of like adding arcane barrier to the set or even spell void, but just like a little bit more damage prevention here or there could have gone a long way. Some other effects to interact. I think that would have been completely fine, but it's all about finding the right balance and letting the mechanics serve the story, serve the gameplay. There's nothing inherently wrong with arcane damage in my eyes. We will find a way to make it part of maybe the best limited format Flesh and Blood we'll ever see. Who knows? But I'm not off the mechanic at all. I think it still has lots of possibilities for success.
Sweet. I'm very looking forward to the next. I'm actually very much looking forward to the next set with arcane damage, in a limited environment. It really feels that, and this is not really a question, it's just an observation, that LSS is very much growing from set to set, and as every new limited environment comes out, it feels like more robust than the last one, and it's really actually awesome to see. As someone who started like with WTR and seeing the game progress, I think it's super cool.
There is a format which is solely about arcane damage. It's called Chaos Shapeshifter Draft or Shapeshifter Shield. That just turns into a battle of Hogwarts as to who has the most arcane damage.
I've seen some weird takes with that when everyone's like, "Oh, you gotta play." Oh, what was it? It's like Claws Dorinthia or something. I don't know. Like there's some weird stuff going on with that.
So wacky.
That's like as in the weeds as you could possibly get. I think
It really is.
Yeah, it's just like whatever. Just do what you want. Mix it all up. All right. So we have another question here. This one's about traps, and I'm just gonna read it verbatim because I don't exactly get what they're trying to ask, but I'm just gonna read it. They're asking about traps, and it says, for trap cards, were they intended to be played in the arsenal for flavor reasons, or is there a functional use? Is that why the crew traps? Is that why there was a errata for the Crucible traps?
I'm not sure I fully follow. I think what they're saying is like it's the original decision to have traps come from Arsenal designed to reflect like setting the trap. And I think the answer to that is yes. I wasn't there for the original trap design, but certainly that's my interpretation of it. As to why the original traps are errataed, we needed them to make the new ones work. Like it really has nothing to do with them. It's just they had a blanket rule for traps that we wanted to get away from. And it was a really rare and unique scenario where we could errata the cards and still make them function exactly how they are printed, which is the type of errata that I really like. And I really the only type I ever want to use in the absence of an absolute emergency. And I think like Briar succeeds on that same axis where there is a reasonable interpretation of Briar that like reads it as its new ability works, not as its first ability works. So that's why that was a really successful errata to me. And these trap erratas are very much in the same vein. I think people probably expect that we just started with traps as they were and tried them out, and I hated them. Like it was something that didn't last very long at all.
They suck so bad.
I was just like, James, I don't think this is working, and I don't think we can make it work. I think these are actually flawed, and that's the conclusion we came to. And I think we got traps into a much more exciting, maybe arguably somewhat less flavorful. I would accept that criticism of them, but ultimately the best flavor in the world doesn't matter if you can't play the freaking cards. Like if they're just completely garbage, then I don't care how flavorful they are because they're not actually giving you that experience. And I think the place where we settled on was just much, much better for traps.
Yeah. I mean,
Fully agree.
I made a whole video about it. The traps, I was actually prepping a video that was just going to be called "These Cards Suck." That was the thumbnail. These cards suck, and I was just talking about the original traps from Prue because they were so bad. Like defense reactions that you can't play the turn that you draw them. You have to wait a whole cycle, which means you have to not pitch them and then also sandbag them in your arsenal. So I very much like the change to traps. Like you said, even though the maybe the flavor has gone down a bit, at least you can actually like play the cards. Like at least they're like playable. And yeah, I've already talked too much about traps previously, but the errata. You mentioned the errata too. I also thought it was very smart the way that you guys did errata. I generally really am a staunch opponent of like functional errata in card games, but the way that you guys did it made a lot of sense, and I think was very smart because it still makes the printed cards do what it says on the card, which I think is really important for like a physical card game.
Yep, that was very important to me.
Yeah, because you never want those situations where you're playing against a new player who doesn't know, and you're like, oh hey, that card that says what it does doesn't actually do what it says that it does, and then you run into these like feel bad situations. The new player might feel like you're trying to cheat them or something. Like it's just never good. So kudos to the whole team, whoever came up with that fix. That was really good. And then now we can actually play with traps. Yeah, let's see. We already asked the one about Benji and Katsu. Okay, this is an interesting one. What's one thing you think? This weird. I'll try to paraphrase it because they asked this. I just copy pasted the questions. I'll just paraphrase it. What's one thing that you think from outsiders could be? There's one thing from outsiders that you think that you as like the dev team and design team has improved from previous sets, and what's one thing that you think could be improved? I think that's kind of the gist of the question.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the draft format is what really stands out as the biggest improvement, and just the actual act of sitting down at the table and drafting the cards, it feels night and day to me. In terms of things that could be improved, that's hard, man. I'm just like so in love with outsiders right now. And that's not to say that like eventually I won't sit back and reflect about what we could have done better, because I know there's going to be tons of things that we could have done better. But in this moment, I'm kind of just like appreciating it for what it is and being thankful that people are getting to experience these heroes and this gameplay design. So I don't have an answer to that now. That's not because I think Outsiders is a perfect set. Not whatsoever, but it's just not something that I've gotten to that stage yet. And I think it's also like something I don't want to rush to conclusions on, right? Because if I make that conclusion now, I'm doing it based off of my own engagement with the set. What's more important to me is how y'all are going to engage with the set and how the public is going to perceive the set. And that is going to do far more to shape my perceptions of what we did well than my own opinions about it. So I just need more time before I'm really willing to answer that question.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
While you're talking about that, I just thought, for no like reason, good or bad. Actually, I really like it. But who designed or like what was the impetus for like the whole like dagger throwing like sub theme in the set? We have flick knives and hurl, and the second I saw hurl before flick knives. I'm like, what? You're throwing the dagger? Like, one, that's super flavorful. And then we started to see more support. I'm just curious about that mechanic in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to pinpoint these things. I know the idea almost certainly generated with either James or I, because it's a pretty large portion of the set. So I assume we brought it to the table pretty early on. Yeah, I can't recall the exact genesis of it, but it's as simple as like, what's something you can do with a dagger? Oh, you can throw it.
Yeah.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And that's where it really came from at that point. And just thinking about the other thing too is like that mechanic basically entirely exists in the Assassin Ninja crossover. And again, I think it's just like sitting down and saying, what do these two classes have in common? What should they both be able to do? And what is unique that they could share? And I think throwing daggers was just a really, really perfect fit.
Yeah. Ninja stars and shurikens and all sorts, isn't it? So
yeah,
that's another thing as well that continues to amaze me about this game is the design space that's available. Like equipping something from your inventory, that's like something that's never been seen yet, and we've seen it in Outsiders. So yeah, it's going to be sick to see where where you go from here as well. So
I will tell you that the next year will be filled with many things you've never seen before. And I think there is plenty of space to continue to expand this game system and do fun, exciting things. So
I'm
nice.
Obviously very much looking forward to that. Yeah, so since we mentioned Assassin and Ranger stuff, this question says, so far only Assassin and Ranger, including talented heroes, can access the poison toxic tokens. Is that exclusively for those classes?
For now, that's the only way I can really answer that question. For now, that's where they are. Will they ever expand? We'll see. We'll see where the story takes us, what happens next time we're back to the pits, whether these horrible diseases make it out of the pits. All those things are, all up in the air. We'll see what goes on with that.
Yeah, kind of like jumping off from that, I'm just curious. Can you talk a little bit about the watermarks on those? I think it's super interesting. So correct me if I'm wrong, but does each plague, I guess you can call them, does each plague have its own unique watermark? And I noticed,
it does.
I noticed that the Fabled, I have it over here, but I pulled the Fabled at the pre-release, so I was pretty stoked for that. But I think that one also has a watermark too, and it might have a different one.
Combination. It's a combination of all the watermarks. Yeah. So there is a textual load that comes with these diseases, and we're very cognizant of that. They are similar but different. Their tokens are somewhat wordy, and we didn't want to get to the point where it felt like a mush. We wanted to make sure all of these effects were clear, pointed, where you get hit with inertia, you understand what inertia is. When you have frailty, you understand what that is. When someone plays infecting shot or whatever, very quickly which one of those tokens it's going to present to you. For this mechanic to succeed, it was just very important that there were these visual triggers all over the place. And, does the watermark in and of itself solve the issue? No, I don't think so. But does consistency in naming conventions, plus the watermark, plus the color being consistent, plus it being limited to 2 of the heroes as opposed to 3 of the heroes, plus them being the pits heroes, so you know exactly which heroes have them. Like, does all of this stuff add together to be a prescription for easier understanding for the players? I think the answer is yes, when it's all taken as a whole. And that's where something like the watermark comes in. So we just wanted as many tools available as possible to the players, because we know we were asking a lot of them to be able to keep track of these tokens. And I think, you guys have experience now. Again, this is going to be the type of thing where I'm going to have to check in with the player base. Did we succeed in this goal? If not, was there something else we were supposed to do? But it was all about just making it as easy to digest as possible. And I think that's something, you asked earlier about what is Outsiders getting better at. And I mentioned draft, but the other thing I think we got just leaps and bounds better at was finding ways to meet player expectation and make this an easier set to comprehend on your first few passes. And I don't know if you felt that when you sat down and were playing your pre-releases, but there's a lot of small consistencies that track throughout this set that make it so much easier for you to know things like every aim counter at common giving +1. You don't have to mess with different effects. You just know what an aim counter does every time. Things like every stealth attack having the same stat line.
Oh, yeah.
Every single disease appearing in like the same ratios, and the mirroring of the assassin kit and the ranger kit. All of these things are designed to just form this cohesiveness throughout the set that makes it much, much easier for players to grasp. And I need feedback on it before I can call it a success. But to me, it felt like we made a big level up as far as that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I only went to one pre-release, so my sample size is pretty small. And to be fair, my pre-release here in Portland, the crowd is pretty competitive. It's like almost all of them are armory grinders. It's like armory grinders, me, and like maybe like 1 or 2 new people, and it's like pretty, entrenched folks for the most part. But yeah, it all felt pretty like intuitive. Like what a blood rot pox does, it makes sense. It's the damage one, right? Frailty is the one that makes you weaker. Sedation is the kind of like the sleepy one. The only thing for the frailty is like some people forgot to continue to read the card and realize that it affects like weapons too. They're like, oh yeah, frailty, no big deal. And I'm like, And I'm like,
the
no,
MVP
no.
of Sealed.
You
Frailty, mate.
keep reading it. Oh, Frailty.
So good.
Frailty was like
Turn
my
off
biggest
those
surprise.
goddamn spider's bites.
Yeah.
Turn them off.
And if I
Get rid of
played
them.
against any ninjas, I'm sure it'd have been great great against the ninjas too. I played against a
Yeah.
lot of Arachne. I played 3 Arachne and one Uzuri. Me, of course, I'm playing as Uzuri because of course I'm playing as Uzuri. But Frailty, I think, was like the biggest surprise for me for the pre-release. Like, I thought it would be pretty good. Like going into it, I didn't realize it would be that good. Like some of the times when I would hit with Death Touch, when I could choose the token, I was like finding myself choosing Frailty way more than I thought I would. Because I'm like, if I just choose Frailty, they're gonna have almost like no turn. And if they just kind of like 2 attack me with Arachne, I'm fine. I'll just block it and just come in with some other stuff. So I was like, Frailty is like way better than I thought. I thought it was pretty good going into it, but it is very good. And what I like about it in particular is like it's super good in this limited environment, but once it gets out into like the overall Flesh and Blood meta, whether it be Blitz or CC, it's still good, but it's super matchup dependent. Because like against some classes it'll do like stone nothing, and against others like Ninja, it'll be very good. And even against like Rangers and stuff. So. Yeah, Frailty is the biggest surprise for me. I guess I guess you can call it a surprise. Yeah. I
just hate those the debuffs on the daggers. Just you take one and then you're like, why did I do that? Which just makes everything else so ineffective.
Yeah, I mean, I found like when you're blocking that, you gotta make that decision. Like, am I blocking this turn at all? Because like
That's it.
Yeah, a lot of the times I used the Seeker's equipment, and I do want to say like right now, I think it's cool how this is. I don't think you had much involvement with Uprising, right?
No, Uprising was before my time.
Okay, but I just want to draw the parallel between the Quell pieces of equipment from Uprising to the Seeker's pieces of equipment. And I very much enjoyed playing with both of them in Limited. I thought the Seeker's pieces were like quite good, and I almost always used the Seekers to prevent dagger attacks. Like, because what I would do, what I found to be very nice is Seeker, pitch a blue, Seeker's dagger, Seeker their dagger, opt, and then I'll have 2 floating, and then I'll do the what's it called? Not present.
Peace of Mind.
Peace of Mind. It's called Presence of Mind, but that's a World of Warcraft thing. Yeah, then Peace of Mind, their next attack. And then also the fact that you opted was like super nice for getting the Ponder token, because you're basically opting your Ponder. I don't know. There's a lot of great value and synergy there. That's the other thing that I was very much enjoying during the pre-release. I was like, oh, this is actually like pretty sick. In my limited set review, I valued Peace of Mind decently well, but at least in Sealed, it was way better than I thought. I had many 5-card hands because 4-card plus Arsenal. It's quite good. It's quite good.
I think I unfortunately played Brush Off incorrectly as well. Well, I attacked, and because Brush Off Red, for instance, says the next time you would be dealt 3 or less damage this turn, prevent it. So if you're taking 5, you can't use Brush Off to prevent that damage, can you? Because you've taken 5 rather than So
you can block with a piece of equipment, like block with a 2 block, and then do it because you would be taking 3. That works.
That's a shame.
That was something that helped me out a lot actually in my limited experience. Was I was actually relatively lucky getting red brush offs, and those against specifically Uzuri were actually really nice because you block with 1 card from hand and they swap in a 6. It's like, okay, well, my thing is blocking for 3. You're presenting an additional 3 damage, brush off, or like any of the pumps as well. Any of the assassin pumps, like even Razor's Edge or whatever. It's like, okay, I'm going to pump this up. You blocked for 2. Now this is dealing 5. It's like, haha. So it was actually, I liked Brush Off in my experience. It was actually like it fit pretty well into the, the overall environment.
Were you able to use it to save yourself from a dagger? Like a dagger throw? Because like, I killed a couple people with Hurl. I was just like, I attack for 0, but it doesn't matter because I'm just gonna pay the alternate cost and throw my dagger at your face. Yeah. The Seekers are good for that too. Anyway, let's get back to more questions. So I'm sure this is another one that you can't ask, but I find it a little bit interesting anyway. It just says, will we ever have a ranger that can use other attacks than arrows? I really like to see Riptide and his harpoon, or Azalea and her daggers. And I think we already saw a little bit of this in Outsiders, but yeah, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, like, Riptide is already finding other ways to do damage, right? He's getting outside the arrow paradigm, and sometimes you take small steps before you take large steps. And I think this just falls under anything else. I'm not going to rule out ideas. In my head, it's not rangers can only ever do damage through arrows. Maybe there are other ways for them to do it. Just got to see where the world takes us.
Yeah. And we had two examples in Outsiders. There's Death Touch, which is a hybrid card, and then there's the other one, which I forget the name of it, but it's the 0/4 hybrid card that if they've defended
Virulent Touch, yeah.
Which is also very
beating.
Which is also a very nice.
Very
card.
strong. Yeah. Very strong.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, this is an interesting one. I think this is more of a creative side, but it'd be nice to get your opinion on this. So this is non-Outsiders question. Can we have other races for heroes other than humans? And like brutes, they're looking at like dwarves, elves, werewolf, dragons, non-humanoid creatures.
Yeah, I would say look at the art that exists in Flesh and Blood, and that probably tells you what is possible, right? And this isn't like any inside information. This is just like me as Flesh and Blood player. I would look at the art and be like, well, there's a dwarf, there's a dragon, I don't see, again, why not? Why not? If it makes sense, if it's cool, let's do it. That's what I say.
There's a dwarf, there's a dragon, there's a Reiner thing.
Yeah.
I've read almost all the lore. I still don't know what the Reiner tribe people are. Like, are they orcs? Are they just humans? I don't know. Like,
they're just Reiners. They're just Reiners.
They just are.
Just
yeah.
Reiners.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay, here's another just off Outsiders question. One that I don't know if you can answer or not, but how far away are you from planning the sets? Not just theme, but mechanics too. So I guess the question is just how far out are set releases? And
yeah, I'm probably not going to go into specifics on that. I will say that we're getting better and better at having more lead time, and that's letting us take more risks and do more exciting things. And I think like over the past year that I've been there, we've done a lot to get sort of ahead of schedule a little bit more, and it's been good. It's offered us a lot of creative freedom, and I think some of the successes that hopefully start with Outsiders and you'll see continue throughout the year, I think we can attribute a lot of that to getting some freedom in scheduling and getting a little bit more ahead. So it's been very positive on that front.
Yeah. Just I guess a personal question for you. How often do you find yourselves traveling back to New Zealand, back and forth? Because I know that you had a couple very public travel I don't want to say incidents, but you had a couple very big travel things happen to you in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, well, I leave again on Saturday for Auckland, so I'm headed back again, and I basically had about 5 weeks at home from the last trip, and that's kind of how I'm operating on a half here, half there schedule right now, and maybe that leans more in one direction than the other in the coming years, but we're just finding a very good workflow right now. I'm getting very comfortable working with all aspects of the team. We're understanding what is best done in person, what is best done remotely. And like I said, I think we're starting to get some really good results from the collaboration, that I'm having with the design team, that I'm having with the dev team. And that is not, me trying to take any credit from it. It's just all of us growing simultaneously together, understanding the game we're creating a little bit more, all the way up to James. I think James will be the first one to tell you that he just learns more about Flesh and Blood every single day, basically. And I think we all are. And these partnerships that we're developing, they're just getting more and more fleshed out. We're getting better and better at working with each other and working within the confines of our game. So
yeah, I mean, also I wouldn't blame you if you ever wanted to move to New Zealand at some point. I don't think anyone would. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's very nice. I enjoy my time there quite a bit. And the problem is the house I just purchased here, which is also quite nice. I'm a pretty big fan of it. And all these relatives that insist on living here in America for some reason that sort of keep me tied here.
That insists on living here. Yeah, it's their fault.
Yeah.
Blame
For some reason.
If it was as simple as just like evaluating one place versus another,
Right.
I probably would already live in New Zealand. Like it would just be that simple. But unfortunately, there's a lot of other competing interests that make it a harder question than a one-to-one analysis.
Yeah, life is frequently much more complicated than just a yes or no kind of thing.
Yep, of course.
Yeah. I guess you mentioned the teams. I'm just very curious. Are the teams like steadily growing, or has have you reached like a good size? Do you feel?
Yeah, I think we're at a good size now. There is always constant growth. I mean, LSS is just getting bigger and bigger, right? Like we're taking on more and more. We're selling to more and more regions. We're trying to make more and more cards as time goes on. It's just like as you do that, you need more people, and I think there's always room for expansion. But it doesn't feel like we're like short-handed at this point. Like we're getting to a more stable place, which is really good. Nice.
And you mentioned more regions. I mean, a huge shout out to all of our Japanese listeners. I know we have a few out there, and I'm probably not as excited as you all are for Japanese localization next year, but I'm still pretty excited for it, and I'm very excited for the folks there who are currently playing Flesh and Blood in English in not their language, which is that's a lot of dedication.
Oh, and the response is incredible. I don't know if you saw the map of like the pre-release locations in Japan, but it's just expanding so quickly for a game that is not available in Japanese yet. Like it's really an astounding achievement, and they've been such an incredible community. They've embraced the game so dramatically. I can't wait, to do more things with the Japanese market and to get over there and see Japanese Flesh and Blood with my own eyes. It's going to be an awesome experience for sure.
Yeah, I've had some interactions with some Japanese content creators. I think most of them were formerly Magic content creators, but the interaction has been great. The community seems awesome and positive, and I gonna do my darndest to make it to a Japanese calling if one fires off next year. That's gonna be like on the top of my list because I want to go to Japan anyway, and it's just a really good excuse to go and see the country, and then also go to a Flesh and Blood calling and do that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
I'm very much excited for that.
No, it would be a real realization of the sort of the baseline goals of Flesh and Blood, like inspiring people to travel all over the world, to make these connections with new communities, with new cultures, with new countries. Like it just feels like it's going to be a real watershed moment for Flesh and Blood when that happens.
I agree. I think so too. Okay. So this question is actually really interesting. It's kind of like pivoting off topics back to more design and development, but I think this one comes from Twitter. It says, is there anything that decides if you'll reprint a card like Come to Fight versus making a brand new card?
I think it's just how well does that card fit with our goals. Like if there is a card that perfectly achieves the thing we want to achieve and it makes sense thematically, bring it back. Like I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. I think we have some really good glue pieces in our game that are really appropriately balanced, statted, mechanicked to go ahead and fill some very specific roles across sets. Like I couldn't imagine this format without Ravenous Rabble. I think it's just like the perfect fit. It does absolutely everything we want in this format. Why would I try and reinvent the wheel? We have this brilliant card out there. Let's just bring it back. And that's really the only consideration is like, is this the right tool for the job? If so, use it. Use it. You don't have to make a new card every time. I think that's completely fine.
Yeah. And I think Ravenous Rabble is a great example because like when I saw that it was reprinted in the set, I was like, yeah, of course it is. Like, of course it's reprinted in the set. It just makes sense. Like, it's the pit set, Ravenous Rabble, also like the top of the deck, looking stuff. Like, it just makes sense.
Yeah, just run through what this card does across all the heroes, right? Like in a Redline Arachne deck, it's just another powerful go again attack, which you very much need. In Uzuri, she can flip it in and always get it as a 5-power attack. And also, like, Uzuri does occasionally want to extend combat chains a little bit, so that's a useful way to do so. Yeah. You go to Benji, if you get the right sizing, you get your unblockable attacks. Really good. Katsu is like maybe the weakest home for the card, but like it's fine. It's a fine card in that spot.
Yeah.
Then you get to someone like man, I almost said the development name of the hero, Riptide. If we get to a hero like Riptide, you might go ahead and deploy your Ravenous Rabble and get to reload your arsenal, which is really nice. And I think Riptide can go wide efficiently for sure. And then you get to Azalea where you get to look at the top of your deck, which is what you want to do as often as possible. So it was just a slam dunk across 5 of the 6 heroes. We were, at least in my head, we were always going to use Ravenous Rabble. It was way too good with the mechanics in this set.
Yeah, sweet.
Well, one of my favorites was Scout the Periphery red, because it's just another way to buff your attack from Arsenal. I know it's going to be an arrow, so it can be played from there anyway. But yeah, just that extra look at the target hero's deck. Obviously, you want to look at your own, but that's one of my favorites. Just like I love read the glide path, anything that looks at the top of the deck and gives you a buff. I was just like, when I saw that, I was like, yes, please. Another 0 cost buff that allows you to look at the top of the deck.
Big for Azalea for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely love it.
Yeah, I was actually pretty happy to see, what is it called? It's not New Horizon. It's the one where you alternate cost, put the card on top of your deck. If you do, it gets
Seek Horizon.
Seek Horizon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another just great fit, I think.
Oh yeah, I think that's a great one for Azalea in particular, but it's fine with the other classes too. But for Azalea, it's super nice. All right, so here's another question I'm going to ask anyway, but I'm like 99.9% sure you can't say anything on it. Can you give us any tidbits as to where we might be going next in the world of Wraith for the next draft set? So I assume they're meaning the set to follow Dusk Till Dawn.
Hell no, absolutely not.
Yeah, like I put it on here, but like with 100% knowledge of like I don't even think James White would answer this question. So I'm like,
I don't think he would either. You'll find out eventually, and it'll be fun. I promise.
Oh, for sure. There are theories abound. I even made my own little conspiracy theory video on it. We'll see if we're right. We'll see if we're wrong. But either way, I think it's fun to guess and speculate on that kind of stuff.
Where do you think we're going next?
So, okay, it's complicated. I think there's a decent chance that it's Mysteria. I would like it to be Metrics, mostly for all of the Dash and Mechanologist fans out there. Shout out to everyone who wants a new CC mech hero. But I have a theory that it is Mysteria. And I think it makes sense lore-wise because we have Benji and Katsu in the pits, and if they travel back home to Mysteria, it kind of like extends their journey. So it makes sense a little bit from like, extending out from outsiders. And then also there's the card, the Katsu specialization that mentions the word transcendence and it puts it in a capital T, which is kind of weird. And I'm like, that seems like it could be the name of a set. So that's my current speculation. Either Mysteria or Metrics. Those are in that order. That's my yeah.
We shall see.
Yeah. And like I said, it's just fun to speculate. It could be totally off. It could be like Savage Lands or something, and I'm just not even close. But I think
it is fun. It is fun. I enjoy all this talk. Like it is, you feel good if you nail it. It's harmless speculation if not. So, and also it's just a way to get your preferences out there. Like where are you hoping for? What excites you? I think it's all in good fun.
Yeah, and it's like great way to like engage with the community. Everyone just talking about stuff that they love, and I think that's honestly just a really good sign that people love the game so much that they're very much looking forward to where it's going, and they're spending time just talking about it, which is like
there's buy-in, man. There's buy-in to these different parts of Wraith, and people buy into these classes. It is 100% something people care a lot about, and that's awesome to see.
Yeah, like 100%. Let's see. Okay, so here's another one that I think as posted or shared from his Discord. They're curious about the shift from contract to stealth for assassin. So could you talk anything about like the development of contract and versus like stealth?
Yeah, I've heard some disappointment from the Arachne mains out there. I've heard people say they wish we went back to contract here. There was something different we wanted to do. There was a different story we wanted to tell. This idea of like the shared mechanic that doesn't actually do anything, it just allowed us to do really awesome stuff in the limited space in particular. I also push back on the idea that Arachne didn't get support in this set. Like that's wild to me. Yes, there's no contract cards. Concede that point. You're 100% correct. And there's more equipment that wants silver, and you didn't get new ways to make it. And I understand like that is a little bit discordant, but there's a good base to make silver. Like we gave some very powerful tools for that. To me, the issue that Arachne was having in the last metagame, as much as they were having issues, but keep in mind Arachne did win 2 ProQuest, better than Azalea. Sorry, gents. Already on the living legend board. So saying that like the hero was just abandoned, man, I don't buy that at all. I think there's really strong assassin cards here. We could talk about things like the codexes. We could talk about spreading plague is an awesome reaction. There's just a lot of things assassins can do. Redback Shroud is a particularly effective card for different builds of Arachne. So I think in some ways it's been a little bit overblown to the extent that Arachne was quote unquote abandoned. But ultimately, like, we just did what was right for this set from a limited perspective, from a storytelling perspective, from a fun gameplay perspective. And look, there will be more contracts in the future. Like, I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying that. Just at some point we will make more contracts. That's how these things work. Game expands over time. We do more and more stuff. And if that's where you feel like Arachne is lacking, you'll probably have some new tools. But I don't think that's the case. I think Arachne just needed a little bit of a push and got some pretty meaningful cards from this set. So,
I mean, honestly, for me personally, as someone who more or less mains a combination of Ranger and Assassin, I didn't actually see it as like abandoning it. For me personally, maybe this is just because I've been playing Flesh and Blood since the start. But I saw it as more like a parallel between like Viscerai and then like Chain, right? Because like Viscerai cared a lot about rune chants and rune chant generation, and then you have Chain who doesn't like care about that. He's doing his own kind of thing, and that's kind of how I viewed it. And
it's an interesting question, right? Like, how do these two card pools, which at first appear to be very separate, how do they actually combine? Like, where can you find synergies? And like, how much of an interest does Uzuri have in contracts? Is that a mechanic that she's supposed to delve into, or is she supposed to be solely focused on this kind of like big make generic command and conquer type setups? I think all of these things have to be explored. And to say we either like completely fragmented one card pool from the other or completely abandoned a hero, I think there's just not enough kind of creative thinking going on there. There is a distinct lack of contract cards, not trying to dispute that, but it's not as cut and dry as, Arachne was just sort of left out with no new tools.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me personally, like you said, like nothing's off the table. So, the next expansion set that we have where we get like assassin stuff, I know I'm going to be keeping a keen eye out for like both the stealth cards and like the contract cards to like, power up my Uzuri or Arachne or whatever, or maybe even both. Because on my current Uzuri list, I am running some contract cards. I'm running the really, really strong ones, of course, but your surgicals and your leave no witnesses and that kind of stuff. But yeah. Here is another one that, well, I'll just ask it. When are we getting more generic weapons?
I don't know. Like, at some point, that's a fine thing to do. It's the same as everything else. Like, we've done it in the past. We'll do it again. Yeah, I'm sure. When it makes sense for there to be more generic weapons, we will make more generic weapons. Okay, that is my answer.
I look forward to the. Oh, go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, if Talishar is so great, why isn't there a Talishar 2?
Talishar.
Good question. Good question.
You can do the whole Lord of the Rings thing and be like Talishar reforged,
Yeah. The found prince.
Yeah.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes right now.
Yeah.
Please don't note that down. Please.
Now it has 5 rest counters before it gets destroyed. Oh, it's so good. So I think we already talked about this one. It was talking about the mesh between like lore and mechanics, and you said it's kind of like a mishmash of the two. Interesting. I think this is more or less touches upon the last thing we talked about. This one says, what do you think about the design space for Arachne and CC? what do you think it would look like moving forward to help the hero be more relevant while also not overcompensating?
Outsiders.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we're headed in that direction. And look, nobody loves Arachne as much as I do. Like, I have a huge place in my heart for that hero. I very much want to see them succeed. Although I probably like Uzuri a little bit better now. But still, that's not to say I have turned my back on Arachne. I have fondness for both these heroes, and they will continue to evolve over time.
That was going to be my follow-up question. I was going to say Arachne or Uzuri.
Yeah, it's Uzuri now. And I think my stance on these things. I don't like to claim a card or a design, but when it was decided that Uzuri was kind of going to be the headliner for this set, James kind of congratulated me, and he's like, the hero you made is going to be headlining. It's going to be the front and center on the package. So I guess that means I do get to play Uzuri. And I do remember coming up with the mechanic, but again, there's something that had to be fixed a bunch and had to be sorted through rules text. It is very complicated. It's very hard to get to work under the rules set. And obviously the rules team did a great job making a very exciting, very functional hero.
Yeah.
But Uzuri is just such a delight for me to play. It's just the perfect encapsulation of how I like to play not only Flesh and Blood, but all card games. So I fully love that hero.
Yep. I'm there with you. Probably not to as deep a degree, but let me put it this way. Uzuri is the first CC deck that I'm building in a while. I've been mostly on Blitz because frankly I don't have a lot of time, but I love Uzuri, and I think she'll be cool in Blitz too, but I really want to build her in CC. I think it's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, she's a blast.
Yeah, I absolutely cannot wait. It's also one of those heroes that, or at least a preview card that I literally messaged Joshua Scott. And I'm like, hey man, I want to make sure that I'm getting what I'm about to say correct. I want to say the right thing for the video. So please let me know if I'm wrong on any of this stuff. Turns out I assumed correctly, but it was still one of those things. And even after that, a couple of small things came up.
She's got a lot of words, but I find that she functions as you would expect her to for the most part. And that's what I really like about her.
Yeah. The only tricky part that I didn't realize off the top of my head is just some syntax with how it's worded, in that you have your opponent has a response after you put the card face down. That's kind of one thing that it's more or less like a corner case thing, but it could come up in certain situations, whether the card has a certain effect on the combat chain, like Dominate or whatever.
Yeah, Command and Conquer is a huge influence on making sure that card works that way. Wreak Havoc, which is obviously present in the set itself.
Yep.
And I got blown out by this weekend where I did have the defense react in Arsenal, and I'm had the opportunity, and I'm like, it's not going to be Wreak Havoc, is it? It was. Of course it was. Yeah. And so you just get wrecked in that spot. But it doesn't wreak havoc unless the rules are set up that way. And I think it's really important to preserve those moments. So I'm very pleased with the solution that the rules team came up with to make Uzuri work how she does.
Yeah. And I also like the subtle thing where on attack and on play effects don't trigger either. So you don't have to pay alternate costs, or you don't pay any costs at all, actually. Just straight up no costs. And so it comes up with, you have this cool interaction where I'm going to be looking at every single generic card basically that comes out that has an alternate cost or extra thing, and I'm like, oh, can I use this in Uzuri, right? Is it going to go well with her? Can I cheat some sort of a effect or something, which is really cool. I really like that for card games in general, but especially when it's on one of my favorite heroes, if not my favorite hero.
Yep, the hero really kind of moved itself into my S tier when we found all these fun ways to cheat with it, and empowered players to do cool stuff, and cataloged all the things in our game that interacted with it. And there's just cool stuff out there. There's exciting interactions, and I don't think they're anything that are super well hidden. It doesn't take long to read Ravenous Rabble and be like, okay, I get my extra point of power here, but you still feel like you're getting away with one when every time you use Uzuri, actually, you feel like you're getting away with one, which is the part I really love about her.
Yeah. Yeah, Ravenous Rabble is actually extra cheeky because you get to go again too. So it's just I get to go again now. So I have a turn that's a lot wider than you thought it could be. Yeah, it's cool.
That's a big deal. It matters for Uzuri for sure.
Yeah, it's super.
What I love about it as well, it's just because it's an eternal game. There's when these heroes come out, you can look back at other cards that say that when you attack with this, because you're not attacking with it, you're looking at it in a completely different way then, because this hero opens up the ability to do those things. So I think we're gonna keep discovering that as well, right? With whatever comes out next, we're gonna look back and see how we can break it, which is nice.
It's fun. It's one of the fun parts about deck building in this game.
Yeah.
This one is, what are your thoughts on the current conversation around gems? And so this question's a little bit vague, and I'm unsure exactly what the current conversation around gems is. But I guess a better question would be, what are your feelings on gems as cards and fables in general?
How did it feel when you opened that gem at the pre-release this weekend?
My hands were shaking. Let's put it that way. Dude, it's like my third pack in, and I saw the border, because like I knew the border immediately, and I'm like, oh, it was. And then I obviously like cheered. I feel, said sorry to the people around me. I'm like, I'm sorry if I was super loud, but yeah.
I feel like we all have these gem stories, right? Like I know in the first ever box of Flesh and Blood I bought, it was a Welcome to Wraith Unlimited box. I opened Heart, and I didn't know what it was, and I went and I'm like, whoa, this card is expensive, and it kind of like kicked off my collection right off the bat. And I remember going to a skirmish, and the store basically gave you like a rainbow distribution of packs as part of your entry. So you got one pack of WTR, one of Arc, one of, I think it may have been every set that was released at the time, and the last one was Everfest. That's the newest set that had just come out. And I opened Grandeur in my one of Everfest pack that I got as a door, like an entrance fee. And like those moments, they still stand out to me. They're still exciting to me. And there is always a balance between affordability and collectability, and how much each should inform our game. And like that is something that is being carefully considered, and we want as many people to be able to play this game as possible. Like, we don't want anyone cut off for it, but there is a reality you have to accept in TCGs, and that is they are a luxury hobby, and some folks are going to be priced out of some things that they may wish to have. And look, I wish the world wasn't that way, but it is, and you kind of have to take things as you find them. And one of my favorite tweets on, it's not pointing towards this specific topic, but it is just on like these expensive game pieces as a whole and the collectability of it. And it's from my good friend Patrick Sullivan, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's essentially, he's talking about a dual land in Magic, and he's representing outrage. It's faux outrage. He's saying it's absolutely ridiculous that this dual land in a card game that I want to play with my friends costs $400. It should cost $200 instead. What's the difference? There's no difference. There's no actual difference. Like, both of those things are equally ridiculous, but it's just like the nature of the thing we're engaging with. So none of this is to say like I'm not cognizant of complaints that like gems are expensive. They add a lot to the cost of competing at the very highest level, which I think is a very, very important distinction to make. Like, you do not need gems to go play at your local armory. You just don't. And, even at the highest level, like you can, you always want to do things optimally. You can get away without a lot of these gems. And I understand the sentiment around the topic. I do think it is something that like gets amplified in internet spaces, is what I would say. Like, it is a very easy topic to get juiced up about. And I think that's because it is reflective of broader societal topics. When you actually get down to it, it's about like capitalism and haves and have-nots. And it's very easy to use that as a mirror to kind of hold up to society and say, like, this is frustrating. And I agree with you. It is frustrating that we all have to have this fight and this struggle to get the things that we want and need, and don't get to share in some of the luxury that we as a society and as human beings have created on this planet. Like, we basically live in a post-scarcity world, and not all of us get to tap into that. A lot of us are still forced to struggle under the weights of created scarcity, and it's very much reflected in things like collectible card games. So I am empathetic. I don't want to sound like I'm hand waving away the problem, but it's one of those things that I'm going to give a frustrating answer to, where it's just like it kind of is what it is, and this is the nature of our space.
Yeah, fair enough. Sweet. So I think we have one more question, unless you guys have questions. And this one is one that I think is also interesting, because I think Alan actually spoke a little bit about this when he was on the podcast. And that is just like, what is the current meta inside LSS HQ? Now, Alan basically told us that each different department kind of has its own meta, and like there's like leagues and that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure if those are still going on, but I'm just kind of curious about that, and so is the viewer.
Oh, if I told you the meta on my side of things, it would be giving you way too much information.
That makes
you're
sense,
you're not getting that one out of me. We are obviously thinking about the future, trying to keep our pulse on what we expect competitive meta games to look like, and we're excited for where things are going. But as far as specifics, I can't give you those. I think they're going to come to fruition very soon in the real world, and you will see what our meta games were.
All right, Az, we're gonna see if everyone on the internet is true and Azalea's S tier busted.
S tier busted, yeah.
What do you think, Az? Did we do it? Is Azalea going to go ahead and finally get those living legend points, or is it just more copium for Ranger players?
It's always copium, always. But yeah, I think it will happen. Yeah, I think it will happen. I think she'll get at least something. But I don't know. I think a lot of the screenshots that I've been sent, a lot of the sort of hashtag Azalea cults that I've seen and stuff has been red buff, tunic activation into an 18 dominate with multiple plagues on hit. Does that exist with ice? I don't know. And it's Talishar screenshots as well. So obviously it's not the top level. So we'll see, but I reckon she will get something. But ice still exists.
Honestly, I thought Azalea was strong enough after Dynasty. I thought she was going to do it in the last season, get her first Living Legend points, and I would have picked her as a favorite to get Living Legend points before Arachne, actually, and it did not play out that way. I would be shocked if she can't find Living Legend points after the release of this set. It would be very surprising to me.
I wonder if it's just because like people aren't willing to give her a shot yet. I think I wonder if it's just like the stigma where like a lot of the the top end professional players are just stuck on like, oh yeah, Azalea sucks, I don't even want to bother. Hopefully outsiders with all the support, gives people a second glance or causes people to glance at Azalea a second time to give her another shot.
I think so. And I really love when you do see some of these top tier players like diversify their playbook a little bit. Like someone like Chris Iali comes to mind, World's runner up, just been playing a ton of Lexi at basically every event recently, really looking to move that archetype forward. So you love seeing things like that. And, it would not shock me if somebody out there decides to give Azalea a chance for the first go around and we see like a Michael Hamilton show up with Azalea at one of these events. It would be pretty amazing to see what someone like that could do with a hero that has been historically the absolute dregs of the metagame.
No, that would be insane actually. If Michael Hamilton just rolled up with Azalea and just absolutely.
I mean, he's got to kind of pick up some challenges at this point, right? Like he should just try and win a calling with every hero. That's what I would be doing in his spot.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Like I believe it. He could probably do it. Let's go. Like Michael Hamilton, Arachne, win a calling with Arachne. Let's see. I would love to see that. Yeah, I mean that's gonna conclude all the questions that we had lined up. Az and Bill, is there anything else you wanna mention or anything?
I honestly, again, was just really impressed with the overall design of the set. I can especially seeing how the games played out when I was doing the sealed events that I was doing. Things felt very intentional. I feel like it will only get more I'll only get more of that feeling once I actually start seeing actual like draft games. I feel like Sealed probably doesn't give the entire story behind how the set is supposed to go, especially with rangers needing a specific type and amount of arrows as a breakpoint, ninjas needing blue 0 costs, stuff like that. I feel like that sort of plays itself out a little bit better within draft. But even with that being said, within Sealed, you could really feel how each of the heroes were sort of designed with each other in mind. There are really cool ways to play around specific things. There were 2 times actually that it came up where Virulent Touch getting defended by a defense reaction from Arsenal was relevant. And it's just like tiny little things like that where it was just very expertly done. And so for any of that you had a hand in, just like freaking good job, man. It was really, really nice. Things played really well together.
I appreciate that. And it is my sincere opinion that Sealed should be your introduction to Outsiders Limited, but please don't let it be the end of your Outsiders Limited experience, even if you're not a drafter and it's something that you find intimidating or you've never done before. I really encourage everyone to go out, draft this set, give it a shot. There are those guardrails in place that we've very meticulously designed in this set. I hope it'll be pretty easy to access from a drafting perspective. I hope it'll offer something to everyone. And I think it is really where this format just shines super, super bright. And I can't wait till y'all have a chance to get more time to play on that side of the fence.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm honestly just really looking forward to Friday when I can crack open my boxes that I have set aside for myself.
Me too.
Oh yeah.
I just hope they get here in time. That's the thing. For whatever reason, I live in Oregon. I live in Portland, and even if they're like shipping from someplace that I would consider like fairly close, I don't know why they always get routed to like Kentucky or some crap, and they still take forever to get here. So I just hope I get them on launch day. We'll see. There is, if you have a couple more minutes, there's one other thing I just wanted to get your general opinion on that I've seen. And that's just kind of like your general opinion on like the overall power level of Outsiders. This is something that we were actually talking before you hopped into the call. And I was saying that I'm pretty sure when Aria came out, a lot of folks didn't think it was very strong. A lot of people were like, oh, to fuse, you had to have extra cards in hand. So it's kind of like this, leeching kind of mechanic. And then, hindsight being 2020, we all consider Aria one of the most busted sets that they've ever done. But on launch, I don't think anyone considered it like overpowered or anything outside of like Duskblade or whatever. So yeah, just like your opinion on the general power level, what you feel of Outsiders.
One caveat I'll put forth was that we had no desire to sort of chase the power level of the first wave of heroes that have defined like the competitive side of our game through this, nascent stage of Flesh and Blood. And, it's hard to remember, but we're only like a year into what I consider the real start of our competitive history, like that first calling circuit that you guys covered, Kellen. I think it was, where's the first? Las Vegas, right?
That was the first one. Yeah, it was Monarch. So that was
tail end of Monarch.
Yeah, that was I think it was actually the Aria World Premiere event. I think it was mushed together. I think it was Aria World Premiere event.
You're right.
And then so it was literally the start of Aria. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not all that old, but at the same time, like I don't think we have any desire to chase the heroes that have defined this era. We're not trying to make more Oldhams, not trying to make more Starvos, definitely.
Oh, thank you, please. Please, no. Please, no.
Chain, Prism certainly needed to step down. Even Briar, which is just on that cusp of living legend, we probably crossed some lines there, and we obscured a lot of these earlier heroes like Katsu, like Azalea, like Dorinthia. They really got buried under this power progression upward, and I think that everyone at LSS has done a really good job pumping the brakes on that, because it's really easy as a card game designer to just keep going, and before you know it, you've power crept your game into oblivion, and there's nothing left. There's no joy left in it. It's just this ridiculous game and all these old cards are completely outmoded and you can't even play them anymore. And we pumped the brakes really hard on that. I think we let up on the brakes a little bit with Outsiders. Like this is trying to put some of these heroes that have historically been in the lower tiers into real competitive heroes. And I believe that there are unquestionably new entrants into tier 1.5 of the competitive metagame. And I think there's a good chance that there are just outright new tier 1 heroes as well. And when you're talking about tier 1s that are currently defined by Oldhim, Icelander, you could argue Briar is in that mix, maybe Dash, but I would have Dash a tier below, I think. Yeah. But just some very powerful heroes. If you're talking about a hero possibly starting to get on par with them, that's a powerful set. And I think that's what we're headed to in the aftermath of Outsiders.
Yeah. Nice. I very selfishly really hope that Assassin is very good. So I mean, it's my favorite class, so obviously I really, really hope it's good. It's hard to tell at this point. But yeah.
But we're in the cusp of like a big change in Flesh and Blood, right? Like we're getting to the point where we've already said goodbye to a lot of those heroes, the Chains, the Prisms, the Starvos, and heroes like Oldhim and Icelander starting to creep very close to that living legend status. I think Flesh and Blood is going to dramatically change once that happens. And, I wouldn't say like it's a moment I'm looking forward to. I have a lot of love for our current crop of heroes, and I think our current metagame is going to be quite good. But it is going to be interesting. It's going to be a whole different ballgame at that point. And, I think the metagame kind of just completely gets flipped on its head once those heroes leave, and the way we even engage with the game, the way we do deck building, totally different at that point. And I think we're just starting to take those first steps to that. I talk about it a lot as FAB 2.0, and I know that means something else in our game. Obviously, that was the shift away from like the first distribution model.
Yeah.
But it does feel like we're starting to get to the cusp of classic constructed 2.0. And I'm excited for the moment where we're well and truly there.
Yeah, so like a meta 2.0, or like even like a design or development, or design, I guess 2.0 kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I don't think that's like crazy either. I think a lot of games go through like design and development cycles, like for sure. So yeah, I think that's cool. And I think it's one of those things that like for folks listening now and like into the future too, I think it's like a really interesting thing to keep an eye on as the game evolves, because it's still like a pretty young game. The game's only been around for less than 4 years, right? I think this is their 4th anniversary this year, coming up on 10 sets. And I'm a firm believer, and I have been, for a very, very long time, that it's just gonna get better, like from here on out. And I'm personally really excited for it. And thank you, Bryan, for like your contributions to the game. So far, I think it's been incredibly like awesome and positive. And yeah, I think all of us are like.
I very much appreciate that. Sometimes I wonder if it's just like right place, right time. I very much hesitate to take any of the credit for the strides we're making, but it does feel like we're making strides. Like just as a fan of Flesh and Blood, which I very much am, I am very much enjoying the products that are coming out right now.
Yeah, and I don't want to like not give credit to like the rest of the LSS team like we did earlier. I think everyone is doing like an amazing job, from creative to design, development, everyone.
Absolutely,
it's all it's all part of like the bigger picture, and everyone's like, incredible at what they do. So yeah. Good. It's a good time to be into Flesh and Blood. And not only that, if you're listening to this podcast and you're a new player, which I know there's a good number of people out there who are, I think it's a great time to be a new player too. Like
Blitz decks. Can we talk about Blitz decks? I haven't spoken about these anywhere yet.
Yeah.
I worked really hard on these Blitz decks that are associated with Outsiders, and they're good. They're really, really good. They're really fun to play. I really encourage you to pick up the full set of 6 and just jam them against each other. And I think you'll have a really, really good time.
Yeah, I haven't opened this yet or done my review, but I will be posting a review of these on Friday. I haven't actually looked at the lists yet or anything, but I'm very excited for it. There are 6 brand new decks here, MSRP like $12 US. And not only that, but the History Pack 1 decks are also coming out very, very soon. So as a new player, you literally have 12 brand new decks to choose from. And I have seen and played with the History Pack 1 decks, and I think they're all really, really good.
I worked really hard in these decks. It was important to me that we had better jumping off points for new players. It was one of the things that when I found Flesh and Blood, I felt was lacking. I didn't feel like I got introduced to the game really well. And LSS, not only did I work really hard on these, but LSS as a whole is working really, really hard on new player experiences. There's exciting developments as far as that goes that we'll see throughout the year. And I think the new player experience is only going to get better. I really encourage you check that out. Share them with your friends. If you have, card game playing friends who haven't quite made the leap into Flesh and Blood, or who I really want to get these in the hands of, are folks who did try and it missed for them. And I have friends who tried Flesh and Blood and just it didn't hit. And look, that's fine. We all look for different things in games. I understand it's not always going to appeal, but I really want them to give it a second chance with these Blitz decks, because I think they're doing something different and showing. The gameplay present here shows what is special about Flesh and Blood. There's really, really good games to be found with these Blitz decks.
Yeah.
Well, that's all part of your experience as well, right? Because you got in with Leviathan and Prism on your
Leviathan and Prism
was perfect.
just maybe the worst intro you could have to Flesh and Blood, I think.
That's literally the worst I could think of. I can't think of anything worse than that. Especially if you're well, it's actually pretty bad both ways. It's pretty bad both ways, actually. I was gonna say,
it's just not really compelling gameplay. But these decks are the polar opposite of that. They're so much fun to play into each other, and I say that as a very experienced, very competitive Flesh and Blood player. I just had a blast playing with them. They were really, really fun.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't played the Outsiders one yet, but the History Pack 1. Did you do the History Pack 1 decks as well?
I did.
I think those are really good. Even the ones that I was like, oh, okay, let's see how this goes. I was like, let's play the Kano and see how Kano is. And same with Viscera, and they play really well. And all the games we played were really close. Even the the Bravo into Kano, or Dorinthia versus what was the other one there? Is there Reinar
as well? I think.
Yeah.
No, there's a Reinar. There's a Reinar deck. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's. Correct me if I'm wrong. I actually think it's all of the original WTR and Arc Heroes minus the ones from Outsiders. So
minus Azalea and minus Katsu. Correct. Yeah.
And so with Outsiders, you actually have the full set of the original 8 heroes plus the new ones from Outsiders. So you have the original 8 plus the 2 assassins and Riptide. I think it's awesome. It's very smart, and obviously it was planned this way, to have 12 new decks all at the same time, because we mentioned earlier in this podcast that being able to choose the character or hero that resonates with you, I think, is really, really important. And here you have the biggest, the widest amount of options possible. Because if you came in during Uprising, for example, which I thought the Uprising decks were pretty good, you have 3 to choose from, right? You can choose, or no, you had 2. You only had 2. It was only Dromai and Phi.
Yep.
And so you either choose Dromai or Phi, or you have to look into the older products, which are hit and miss. Like we said, the Monarch ones are a little bit. Yeah, maybe they could be a little bit better, but
they had mentors though. Those were a cool thing.
Yeah, maybe
mentors
we can talk.
Cool.
Maybe we can talk about mentors in a future podcast with Bryan. We'll talk about maybe mentors future, because I think that is its own discussion that could probably go deep on. And I would wager there's probably a reason that we don't see mentors much. There's probably a reason we don't see them much often.
I'll just say my quick review of mentors is that they are interesting cards, but not very reflective of the Flesh and Blood gameplay process. And I think a poor thing to use to introduce new players to the game with. I think there's probably a spot in our game for mentors. It doesn't feel like it's in intro Blitz decks to me. I mean, it really depends what the goal is with your Blitz decks. To me, they're supposed to be pointed towards new players. And, you mentioned the HP1 Blitz decks. Those especially had to be pointed towards new players because they're being localized in new languages. And our friends over at the Sunflower Samurai team, they just put up a video in Spanish playing with these HP1 decks in Spanish, which is that opens the door to a whole new group of players. It's so important. They have a good way to have a jumping off point. So I'm really excited to see what those decks can do in those markets, being localized for the first time.
Yeah. I know around for the Living Legends in particular, I think it's close to like 60% of the viewers are from the US and then 40% are non-US. And then for me, my own channel, Red Zone Rogue, it's way closer to like 50-50. So having that localization is super important. And correct me if I'm wrong, is Outsiders, I know the booster set is simultaneously launching in all the languages. Are these ones as well?
I'm not 100% sure. My expectation would be yes, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. I don't remember, but if you are in a non-English speaking country that carries Flesh and Blood and it is localized in your language, so Italian, German, Spanish, French, check with your LGS and see if you can get these in your language. I do know the history pack one and the booster set is also in your language too, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, really excited. Simultaneous release this go around, which is awesome to see. I don't know if you saw those the Spanish Marvel codexes, but wow, what a card that is. I have to get my hands on some of those.
Oh, it's gonna hurt me so bad. It's gonna hurt me so bad. I really want the Blood Rot and the Frailty codexes, and oh man, it's gonna hurt my wallet. Those are
in the Romance language, it just really like hammers home that sort of old school feel. They're amazing.
It feels very like, I don't know if medieval is the right word, but like very like old timey classic. Classic is the better word for it. Very, very cool. So unless we have any other questions, I don't think we'll have time for an Arsenal step unless you want to talk about something, Bryan. But
most of my life is focused on Flesh and Blood and Outsiders right now, so I think we mostly have covered my Arsenal step.
Cool.
Even without trying.
I mean, to be honest, for me me too, actually. Oh, that's fine. It is true, especially as I focus more content on Flesh and Blood. It's just like all Flesh and Blood, which is like not bad at all. It's amazing.
No, it's not bad. It's a good way to live your life.
And Outsiders is like even better because like I'm eating real good here. Like, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Any final words, gentlemen, before we cut off, Az or Bill?
Just congratulations on making a fantastic set and bringing Azalea to us all as well. Again.
Yeah, you and the team did an amazing job. I mean, like, that's how my little Twitter conversation with you started. I was just like, yo, I love this set, man. Like, I love it. Like, it's just everything that I wanted from like a Flesh and Blood set. And I can't wait to play more. I can't wait to like get my cases and build decks and brew and all this kind of stuff. Gonna be building Blitz and get back into CC and draft as much as I can, which is gonna actually take me outside of my studio. I'm like perpetually locked in this studio, just slaving away over a hot camera over this thing. So it's
I know the feeling.
Yeah, I bet, man. Well, thank you for coming on and talking with us. It's been a real pleasure, and it's great to hear your insight and to kind of like dive into this kind of stuff. You're more than welcome on anytime. Maybe after Dusk Till Dawn comes out, we can hop on there and talk about some non-assassin stuff. We could talk about whatever that set has to offer. I've heard James is very excited about that set, and so that makes me very excited too. If he's really excited about
it, excited too. It's an exciting set.
Ooh. So yeah, I know a lot of the fans of the other downtrodden classes and heroes like Bolton and Levy are pretty stoked for it. And then of course we have the, Shadow Runeblade and Light Illusionist stuff that's coming out that we don't really know about right now, but once again, it's fun to speculate. It's fun to speculate on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, pencil me in. I'll come back.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. And thank you so much. I hope you have a safe trip to New Zealand this weekend. It's in like a couple days from now. And
I just want to make it in one flight, just straight across, land in New Zealand, no back and forth type deal, just a straight shot, and that's all I'm asking for.
Hey man, whenever I book a flight, even if it's like a little bit more, like from here to Orlando, I'm just like, give me the straight flight, just take me there. I'll just fall asleep. I don't want to have like 3 layovers or whatever. So
I try, but they'll just bring me back to Auckland whether I want to leave or not. So I don't even have control over these things anymore.
Yeah, I mean that is true. That is true. Hopefully it'll be much easier this time for you.
I hope so.
Yeah.
What is it typically as well, Brian? Is it just one plane journey? Is it from where you are to NZ?
Yeah, I drive down to New York City, which is about 2.5 hours, and then I can get a direct flight from there. But I have not successfully taken the direct flight yet. I keep getting rerouted, or the direct flight is full. It only started fairly recently, but this time I should. God, I hesitate to say this. I should have a direct flight both ways, and it should be hopefully a fine journey.
Yeah.
Fingers
Well,
crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hoping.
Best of luck for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have to lay over in like Australia, or does it go straight into Auckland?
It should be a straight shot.
Okay.
Should be.
Sweet. Well, whenever
Yeah,
I make my way to
fingers
New Zealand, fingers crossed for me too, that I could just go from Portland to Auckland and I don't have to like lay over in New Zealand. Or the worst would be like flying down to California and then flying to Australia, and
God.
then that would be the worst.
Oh no, you could do so much. On my first time I went, my flight back was Fiji, San Francisco, LA, New York, and then drive home.
What?
That was the only flight available the first time I went.
So I want to say the Fiji part sounds exciting, but I imagine you're probably just stuck in the airport and it's really lame.
No, it's worse than that. I got charged by the Fijian government for trying to smuggle honey into their country, and I had to pay a $400 fine.
I remember you saying this. That is insane.
I'm telling you, I'm travel
God.
cursed. Just absolutely travel cursed.
That is actually cursed though. That like, not only did you have like waste your time, but they charge you like, was it $400-500 that you just said?
I think it was 400 Fijian dollars, if I recall correctly.
Okay, I'm not sure of the conversion rate, but either way, that's still insane.
Like 2 something. I think it was like 2 something US.
I mean, any amount like is ridiculous.
Just
Yep.
a cheek of it for a jar of honey.
That's what
Like,
you-
come on now.
For a jar of honey.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's what you get for smuggling honey, you honey smuggler.
I guess so. I guess so.
Expensive jar of
Absolute
honey.
honey smuggler.
I mean, I did it. It's my fault. It was entirely my fault. So
It's what you get for not looking up local import honey laws.
yep, absolutely.
Oh.
It's ridiculous.
Anyway, with that note, thank you
Yeah.
all so much for joining us today. I think it was a great conversation. Thank you all listeners for being
Definitely.
here. Once again, thank you, Brian, for being here. Stay tuned for maybe our post Dusk Till Dawn chat with Brian in several months from now. But until then, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time, everyone.
Cheers, folks.
See you around.